Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be re-reviewing Kirby Star Allies for the Nintendo Switch. Yes, on the same day Paper Mario the Origami King came out. I don't have the luxury of review copies, so you guys will just have to be patient with me. However, Star Allies actually was a pretty big turning point in my review process for me. While it may not come across as very significant for most of you, for me, it was when I really started taking seriously the negative feedback I was getting for not having footage in my reviews and just relying on my public speaking skills to keep audiences' attentions. However, apparently that's just simply not enough when you're reviewing a game as opposed to talking about your personal experiences. So, 2 years later, I finally have the tools and the skill set to perfect my original review and really make it so much better than it could have been. So, Star Allies at its base form is another traditional Kirby game, this time in HD. Now before you run to the comments section and correct me, I know that Kirby and the Rainbow Curse for the Wii U was the first HD Kirby game. However, that was a spiritual successor to Kirby Canvas Curse. So this is the first traditional side-scrolling Kirby platformer to be in HD. And honestly, the HD is actually pretty cool. I mean, it leads to some amazing fire, water, and lighting effects, but it doesn't revolutionize the look of the Kirby franchise, like, at all. Kirby still looks like a pink puffball, and most of the characters look exactly the same as you remember, albeit King Dedede gets quite a radical makeover. But apart from that, the HD, you honestly probably could have put this game on the Wii and it probably would have worked just fine. I think the Switch was kind of just an excuse to sell the game because the Wii was dead and the Wii U, well, only had Rainbow Curse. So they said, well, we gotta have a Kirby platform around there somehow, so let's just lazily slap it together. And I'm not trying to imply that a lot of corners were cut, but I think considering what the Switch was already doing and its huge momentum from 2017, I think this was a good Kirby game that came at the wrong time for the wrong system. So let me explain. First off, this is a very play-it-safe Kirby game. You're not really going to see much of anything, if anything at all, that hasn't already been done in a previous Kirby game. And even though this game refines some of the old formulas, it doesn't exactly revolutionize them. Rather, it's content to play with your nostalgia and say, hey, you're a fan of Kirby games, so you'll be glad to see this returning, and this being refined. That's not enough to truly make a new game, guys. Now, don't get me wrong, I love nostalgia. In fact, I would even say that nostalgia is my life, if you've watched my Myers-Briggs videos. However, nostalgia alone doesn't carry a product. Just as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate had a mixture of old and new, even if most of the stuff was old. Whereas Star Allies is mostly just, yeah, let's just continue what another game started. So let me list just a couple of ways in which this is basically just another version of a Kirby game. You might be thinking, well, Paul, you can play as up to 4 players at once. Kirby's Return to Dreamland did that with Kirby, King Dedede, Meta Knight, and Bandana Waddle Dee, which are all playable in this game. Well, what about multiplayer Kirby games to begin with? Kirby's Dream Land 3 had a second player being able to play as Gooey, so even on the Super Nintendo, you could still do same-screen multiplayer. You might be thinking, well, Paul, what about brainwashing the enemies to follow you? That hasn't been done. Kirby Superstar allowed you to transform your copy ability into a fighter, so even if it wasn't a friend heart, you could still have one of the enemies play along as your partner in Superstar, and I presume Kirby games that came after that, but I kind of stopped caring after Superstar. You could also say, well, Paul, what about the music? The music is so much grander and more orchestral than it was in past Kirby games. It really just sounds like what Planet Robobot would sound like if it wasn't on the limited sound capabilities of the 3DS, which itself isn't a valid argument because Kid Icarus Uprising had a full orchestra, and that came out on the 3DS 4 years before Planet Robobot. Then you might be thinking, well, Paul, what about the elemental powers that Kirby can add to his physical attacks, like if he's got a sword, and his fiery ally can imbue the sword with flame powers? That was done in Kirby 64, which is the only other Kirby game to date that let you combine power-ups. But in that game, you had a different power-up for every possible combination of 2 copy abilities, whereas this is really just elemental powers, and occasionally some ideas of brilliance, such as if you combine rock with ice, you create an ice curling stone, but overall the creativity is about as limited as you can get. In other words, the only truly groundbreaking thing this game has done is put cooperation at the forefront. Oh wait, even that's not very original, because Kirby Mass Attack on the DS had you playing as 10 Kirbys at once. And yes, you did have parts of the game where you needed a certain amount of Kirbys to proceed. So, is this game even the slightest bit original? I mean, it's not like they reused the levels, like 99% of them are all brand new and designed for the ground up with this new system. There's also the Dream Palace, which allows you to recruit enemies and friends from past Kirby games to aid in your quest. You've got people like Susie from Planet Robobot, Dark Meta Knight from Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Marks from Kirby Superstar, etc. And I really like how flashy their new abilities are. However, the problem is that you don't get to directly control them in the main storyline, rather they're kind of just along for the ride. Which is okay, there is a mode that you can unlock after you beat the game where you can control them, but it would have been nice if maybe just like in Return to Dreamland, you could also play as King DDD Meta Knight and Bandana Waddle Dee, assuming you had a Player 2 controller. Now, one thing that has been heavily criticized about the original release of Star Allies, which itself isn't even a new thing. Kirby games have always been known for being easy, ever since the very first one. They were designed as a very my first platformer type of approach, and that's why Kirby could hover unlimited times. Because if players didn't like falling into a pit, they could just say, this game is too hard, let's just use the hover function to skip over the hard parts, which is exactly what I did, but not because it was hard, but because I was bored. However, Star Allies sort of takes that ease of approach and puts it to the next level, where the game is so easy that it almost seems like it's on autopilot, because the AI for your allies is really good, albeit sometimes a little bit too good. Like, bosses can be decimated within seconds, whereas I'm pretty sure if Kirby went in with no help whatsoever, they would have actually posed quite a formidable challenge for him. And I think that's why the game mode The Ultimate Choice was added as a post-game bonus, because they figured, yeah, you think the main game is so easy? Well, try playing an endurance round where you're all alone. That's where things change. Now, this game has received quite a lot of support post-launch, and besides just a bunch of Dream Friends being added so that you could play as, all-stars from throughout Kirby's history, you also have a new celebration photo, a new remixed map in the guest star post-game mode that allows for the new characters to get some moments to shine, but most significantly is a brand new story mode called Heroes from Another Dimension. Again, you have to beat the main game to receive it, so there's a lot of really cool post-game content waiting for you, which I would dare say is actually better than the main game itself. Doesn't that always seem to be the case with Kirby games? I don't want to spoil it too much, just in case you haven't beaten the main game and you really want to come into this as blindly as possible, but the simplest explanation is that Heroes from Another Dimension actually does allow you to play as every single Dream Friend, and there are puzzles that are designed around their unique abilities. So in other words, it gives you a chance to not only use the novelty of nostalgia, but actually solve puzzles with it. Because, let's face it, for every Dream Friend you have, there's a regular enemy that could get the job done just as much. In the main story mode, really the only reason you pick these guys is because you liked the Kirby games that they were from. However, I don't believe all of this is necessarily worth repurchasing Star Allies, or even to purchase it for the first time if you've already played it and thought that it was too easy. Because even though Heroes from Another Dimension definitely gives you way more of a challenge than the main game, you actually have to think a couple of times. And there were actually a couple of times where I was worried about getting a game over, which never happened in the main campaign. I might have died a grand total of 10 times, and most of those deaths were either because of input lag in the buttons, or because I was careless because I got too used to the game's easy difficulty, and when an ever so slight difficulty curve came along, I was like, huh, the game actually decided to be hard for 2 seconds for a change. Now, despite all of these updates and patches and improvements, I don't think the game was patched fully to the amount that perhaps the team would have hoped. There are still a couple of minor nitpicks I have, and a couple of glitches that somehow remained within the game. For instance, Kirby still loses all of his copy abilities and all of his allies once you exit out of the game or return to the main menu. So say you're that type of person that doesn't play games all in one sitting, and you need to, I don't know, take a break, or if you're on a time limit, well, too bad, you have to regain your allies from scratch. Say you had the perfect ensemble of dream friends. Nope, you have to go back to the Dream Palace and get them all over again. But wait, you have to press a switch in each individual world to open the Dream Palace in that world. So I think it's safe to say that the easiest one to get is the one in World 1, and that's the only one you want to bother getting, because why would you want to unlock something multiple times? So, if you've only done in World 1 and you're on World 4 and you want a Dream Friend, you have to go all the way back to World 1 just to get your Dream Friend. And I think that's kind of stupid. For a game that prizes itself so much on a celebration of nostalgia, why does it make it feel like it's a chore to get to the nostalgia? If they really wanted it to be a celebration, couldn't they give you, I don't know, an option in the pause menu to, like, quickly warp to the Dream Palace? Kirby has a warp star, does he not? Why couldn't Kirby have just used the star to quickly travel to the Dream Palace and then back to the world you're on? In addition to that, you can only get one Dream Friend at a time from the Dream Palace, and the only way to use it again is to clear a stage, so that's even more tedious. And then completionists are going to have an even more miserable time, because the main collectible this time around is puzzle pieces, which allows you to fill in up to 15 celebration pictures from throughout Kirby's history. These puzzle pieces are found pretty much everywhere. You shouldn't really have a problem locating any of them, as the game seems to want you to find them, as sometimes they just give up and say, yeah, here's like 3 at a time, whatever, we don't care. Now, you do have to go a little bit out of your way to collect the special glowing puzzle pieces, which unlock the pink panels, similar to the Street Pass Mii Plaza minigame puzzle swap. However, they're still not too much of a challenge based on everything else in this game. So, all in all, they're just pictures. Like, the keychains in Triple Deluxe were really cool because they referenced a whole bunch of Kirby games and were like the trophies from the Super Smash Bros. Series. However, pictures don't nearly convey the same amount of excitement. Besides, you can just Google all of them. It doesn't feel like you have to collect them to feel like a true Kirby fan. Not only that, but the pieces aren't always guaranteed to be new ones. Sometimes you'll get repeat pieces, and there is no way to adjust the game's algorithm so that it only gives you the pieces that you need, which I can presume would be especially frustrating if, say, you're only missing 1 or 2, and you keep getting repeat pieces, so then you have to replay the level all over again, and since you don't know which level gives you which pieces, you kind of just have to guess. And a game that requires you to guess to complete it is not a very fun game, in my humble opinion. That's just me. Maybe Gerard the Completionist has something else to say about it, but I don't think he was too thrilled with this mechanic either. Also, the options menu seems to be telling blatant lies, because the hints themselves say, hey, if you want to turn off hints, then you should turn off hints in the options menu, which I did at least 4 times, and they still displayed hints. So, did they just forget to program that? Or maybe in the update, somehow they reprogrammed it so that the hints would reappear? Why would you advertise that you can get rid of something when it's just not going to be gotten rid of in the first place. I don't know, it seems like that's such a minor oversight that when the game developers can put so much love and care into how the game looks and controls and sounds, why couldn't they have gotten something as simple as the options menu right? Is that evidence that this game is rushed? Admittedly, options menu is a bit of a nitpick, but there are still other little things that just plague Kirby games in general that just don't seem to want to go away. And I'm not going to name all of them, because that's all subjective. But I think a good way of summarizing Kirby Star Allies is it's not a bad game. It's not even a bad Kirby game. But I think it was not the Kirby game that the Switch needed. The Switch was a platform that was poised to really show that Nintendo was stepping away from their decades-long traditions and finally embracing what the fans wanted and taking franchises either back to how they were great in the first place or taking them in a radically new direction without losing the franchise's identity. Whereas Kirby Star Allies, and I guess Nintendo didn't learn from that because now we've got Pokemon Sword and Shield, just being content with living in the past. And while I normally don't have a problem with living in the past, as that's exactly what I do, video game industry and real life are very separate things. And so, with that in mind, I think this is a safe purchase. You're certainly not going to have a bad time, but I still think there are better Kirby games out there. I still think this is one of the better ones, in my opinion, but you're not going to see too much that hasn't already been done. And not only that, but these other Kirby games that originated the ideas have stuff that Star Allies doesn't. So why not just invest in one of them instead? So with that, I still think that Star Allies is pretty okay. It's not terrible, it's not terrific, it's just okay. And I think I'm always going to stick to that. I appreciate the post-game updates that add more fan service and the new story mode, but I don't think that's enough for me to change my overall meh opinion of the whole game. Hopefully Hell Laboratory was telling the truth when they said they really wanted to redefine Kirby, but until then, I would say if you're really desperate for a traditional Kirby game that has great ideas, I think you're safer off with something like Planet Robobot or Kirby Superstar. With that, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and I hope you're enjoying Paper Mario the Origami King, because I am really loving that game. Bye-bye!